Hello to all our viewers. I'm Stephanie Garces-Donay, attorney and principal attorney of Garces Law in Arlington Heights. We're here to help parents secure their legacy and protect their children, which is really important because in the event of an unexpected absence. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for everyone that's been sharing the post. We're really excited to have you today. So I want to talk today about estate planning. Estate planning is not something that's really exciting. I know a lot of people have said to me, well, I have a basic idea, but why should I do estate planning? What does that mean? There's a lot of common misconceptions with this. So I definitely want to go into this today to explain it to you. And so it's not many of us don't think about estate planning as if it were, an everyday thing. We actually only think about it, when we really, life forces us to think about it. Yet it is the greatest gift that you give your family, really. And the estate planning is always necessary for anybody. So I'm going to dive into those details today so you can kind of know more about it so that you understand why would it be relevant to you. So today's topic is protecting your family during and post-pandemic. And we're going to talk specifically about estate planning basics for parents. Now, while most of us have been trying to lead a normal life, we understand nothing about 2020 has been normal. I'm sure you could agree. But one of the things that I want to discuss during these unprecedented times is just that estate planning really needs to be geared towards your needs. So we're going to kind of discuss that in general to see if anything here might be a good fit for you, so that you understand how this could be a really good way to not only give power back to parents, but also allow you to have control over your desires, over what happens to your children, especially when you're no longer here. So specifically, I challenge all the viewers today to think about what would happen to your family or your children if you could no longer make decisions for them. And that's really the goal of today, is for you to understand the purpose of today's discussion. So before we move in, we have a couple of housekeeping items. I just wanted to make sure you guys understand that if you have any questions, feel free to drop them below and just comment. You can ask me questions about anything that I'm discussing today. I want to make sure I get to everyone's questions because I know there's concerns out there. I have been getting more phone calls than normal during this pandemic. So feel free to drop your questions in below. And guess what? It's free. The other thing too is that if you don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, some people are more private about it, you could definitely message me directly, or you could call my office and we can set up a consultation. You could also text the office line, which is the number you see on the screen below me. And that is another way for us to communicate. So if that is something you're interested in, you could always do your consultations with us by scheduling them via text or by call. We all also offering virtual consultations. You don't even have to leave your home. You're in the safety of your own home. Really important because this is becoming the norm. How many people here sit on a Zoom call at least once a day? Probably a lot of you. So we are offering in-person and virtual consultations free of charge. So let's get started. Oh, and by the way, forgot to mention this part. I am fully bilingual. I speak Spanish fluently. So if you know someone or you need some services in Spanish, my staff and myself, we all speak Spanish fluently. So those consultations in Spanish are available. So keep that in mind. So I want to just get started really quick to sort of kind of wrap up the housekeeping items. So we're going to keep going here. First, we're going to talk about the thing that's obvious, the current financial and medical climate that we're currently going through as a country. So not to dive into the details about the COVID-19 and all the stress it has brought, but I specifically want to talk about how we can all agree that life has not been easy lately. And that's not a secret. In reality, estate planning for parents is maybe not the top of their mind, but we find ourselves now in this climate, homeschooling our kids, while trying to work from home, if that's even possible. If you have to work outside of the house, there's always a concern of, trying to limit the exposure to your family to COVID-19. And I don't know about you, but we all been doing things that are a little bit odd. How many of you have bought wipes, or I have my hand sanitizer right here that I use everywhere I go, and it's I can't stop using it. I've had to, get the supply online so that I can make sure I have enough. So this is just something that is not normal. And you can even talk to anybody. People are sanitizing their Amazon boxes and whatnot. But one thing we can agree on is that things are odd and outside of the norm. And so still during this climate, life can throw unexpected curveballs at us. And so that is always something that really resonates with me as to why I decided to practice this area of law, which is estate planning. I help you prepare for the unexpected. And as we know, 2020 is a great example of unexpected events and unexpected time for everyone. So because this is one area of the law that gives power back to parents and helps you really, really outline exactly what you want for your legacy in the event of your absence, by law. That is basically what this area is about. So during these unprecedented times, especially now, it's more important than ever to consider the breakdown of what you need of an estate plan. What are the things that I should have in place for my family, regardless of age and regardless of income? So the first thing I want to discuss is everyone should consider a will. There's different versions of wills, but the most basic one is the living will, which is very important and as important as the last will, which are two different things, but they're still nonetheless important documents and one of the ones you should consider. The other one is you can consider, especially depending on a person's assets, we may consider doing a living trust. A living trust is very common and also something each family should consider, assuming that that is within something that we would counsel you for and advise you to do. Always a good idea, and I'll explain in more detail why. The other thing that you may consider that's also super important that every family should have are healthcare power of attorneys. I'm sure you've heard these healthcare directive documents. Very important, equally as important as the next healthcare document, or excuse me, financial power of attorney document, which is another power of attorney that is really important because it kind of complements the other one. So powers of attorney in general are very important to have. Also having, just good counsel on these is really important. So those are the top 5 things that I would say every family should consider during these unprecedented times, because we really don't know when things can happen, and we really can't predict the future, which is why it is important to consider these documents. Now, I want to recap for those of you that are just joining us. My name is Stephanie Garces-Stoney. I'm the founding attorney and principal attorney at Garces Law in Arlington Heights, Illinois. And in this week's Facebook Live, we are considering one of the topics that is on everyone's mind. How to protect your family during this unprecedented time, especially during and post-pandemic. And so we're going to be discussing estate planning basics for attorneys, or excuse me, estate planning, now I lost my train of thought, I apologize. Estate planning basics for parents, not for attorneys, we don't need it. So for parents. So I want to welcome you to join us here Tuesdays at 2:30 to discuss legal topics that might be of interest to you, especially providing legal guidance to parents and to their families. Every Tuesday, 2 o'clock, you can join us here. Now, I know many of you probably have a number of questions as to what is an estate plan. And we throw that word around as attorneys as if we know what everyone knows what that means. But in essence, I wanted to sort of really explain the essential elements of these things, of an estate plan and what that looks like. And so feel free to put your questions below, as I mentioned. So I want to be sure to address these. So the first question that came in, okay, the first question we have here is, should my husband and I protect ourselves in getting a will for our family in the event we catch coronavirus? Well, look, I said it before and I'll say it again. Everyone should consider a basic will. A basic will. Why? Because the will gives control to an extent of what happens to your assets upon death. Now, you get to not only choose the distribution of your assets, but it's also spelled out. So, there really isn't anyone that can say otherwise because they are essentially your last wishes. So these things are important because without one, and we'll talk about that in a second, you don't have control. And so that's kind of what the will really does do for everyone. That's why I say, if there's anything you take away from today, consider a basic will. And they're really inexpensive. So I can talk to you more about that, but just in general, they're inexpensive and they're quick to do. And again, it protects some sort of guidance for your family. The other really important thing about a will is that it provides guardians for your children. You can actually name the guardians that you would want for your children in the event of death. Now, a lot of times people will say, well, I'd rather not leave anything in place because I have, my sister to take care of them. But unfortunately, in Illinois specifically, and I know depending on the statutes of the state that you're in, a will is essential because it really does spell out who is the person that's caring after my children in the event of my death. And a court does not have any say in that because you've already done the hard work and you've already put the will in place. And so that usually takes care of this for you. And so that is really important and something that's very valuable in a will. So, like I said, family, parents, that's the most basic thing you should consider. You can also pick your executor. The executor is really important because this is the person that oversees your affairs when you're no longer here. And so having someone that you've picked yourself is really important. It's powerful. It's empowering to be able to have that in place for your family. There wouldn't be any challenges to that because, again, you've created this ahead of time before your death. So yes, I do think that a long-winded answer really leads me to say you should definitely consider a basic will, for your family, even during pandemic, post-pandemic. There's so many reasons why you should really just consider that for your family. Okay, so we have another question that came in. Let me see what they're asking here. So, okay, the second question is, what happens when you die without a will or an estate plan? Well, that's a really good question. And I really love that question the most when I get asked during consultations about it, because, the common misconception about that is that people will say, well, I'm not worth much. I don't have that much to leave behind, and that may or may not be true, but it doesn't, undo the fact that when you die without any sort of estate plan, unfortunately, the people that have to deal with the issues that come from that are your family, your heirs, your legacy, people that are going to be the next generation that you've left. So the really important thing is that you don't have any control over your assets. And I think I sort of briefed you on that. The other thing is too, it's possible, very possible, that there could be a probate case that's opened for you. So what exactly is probate? Well, the most basic explanation of probate is that there is a court that's overseeing the administration of your estate. And so probate cases do have to be open when you die intestate, is what it's called. Basically, without a will, without a trust, without any sort of estate plan. And so these have to be open for the most part. And guess what? They're pretty expensive. The average probate, and you don't quote me on this, but at least 18, maybe 20,000. And they take time. These things are not 2 months, 3 months, and they could take a year, sometimes 18 months, assuming there's no challenges. So this is what happens when you pass away, without any sort of estate plan. So it's really important for you to consider that. The other thing too, in kind of a misconception, which I'll sort of front, is that people will say, well, why do I need a trust if I have a will? Okay, well, we'll talk about that in a second, but just know that a will, a very misconception that's very common, is that a will avoids probate. And it doesn't. It actually does not avoid probate, which is kind of why when we sit down with our clients and we talk about different types of estate plans, we always try to explain the differences between a will and a trust. And so just keep that in mind, that a will does not avoid probate, but nonetheless, very important for the reasons I just mentioned. And kind of going off of that, while you may consider a will being the thing that you need, depending on anybody's assets, it really can put you into, maybe we would recommend a trust. And a trust is basically, and when I say a trust, there's different versions of this, but for purposes of today, we're going to discuss a living trust. The living trusts are good because they avoid probate. So just the nature of probate avoidance is key. And so this not only allows for the assets to be transferred to the trust during your lifetime, because it basically lives a parallel life with you. It also is important because it avoids probate, and it doesn't really cause as much as a headache to your family, because everything is already established where the assets would transfer into the trust, and whoever is the person in charge of your trust in the event of your death or incapacitation, that is who would be able to do that. And so that's just something to keep in mind, kind of a apples to oranges comparison, because the will is not like the trust, but nonetheless equally as important. The trust also does something that's important. It's private. It's not like a will. A will, when it gets recorded, it becomes public record, as opposed to a trust that it's private. So wouldn't that be nice to be able to put your information in the trust, and God forbid something happened to you, no one has to know what's in it, or what assets were transferred in and which ones weren't. So that's a really big plus to having a trust as well. There's also no need for the court approval process. As I mentioned before, the courts, unless there's a challenge, but very rarely would that happen. It does happen, but assuming that your trust doesn't have any challenges, that's another good example of why having an estate plan is important, because no one is going to be challenging, saying, hey, that's not what she meant to do, when in fact, that is what you meant to do, because you left it in your trust. So confidentiality is key for that sort of thing. The other thing too, important is, without getting too much in the weeds, living trusts are important too in the event that there's a case where you have you've become disabled, unfortunately, or are incapacitated. There is ways for the trust to still work with you while you're living, even if you are disabled or incapacitated. So it has a lot of value in that, because it allows for different type of planning if you become disabled at some point. So again, very different than a will, but has a lot more value, and definitely avoids probate, which is really what the goal would be with most clients, because that is, again, stressful and expensive to your family. The other question I have here that I think someone has sent in, which is a good question, is what is the difference between getting a form online and hiring an attorney? It's very important for everyone to understand the difference between, going on Google to get legal advice and an attorney. Google, unfortunately, we are competing with them, because people do go online to look for these forms. However, you have to remember that Google and any sort of online format cannot provide the same service, the same answers to your specific questions, to your needs. That you have, a family, maybe a growing family. They know, what your assets are. Whereas Google may not know all of that. And remember, for a will to be valid in the state of Illinois, or whatever state you're in, you have to make sure that you are counseled by someone that knows the law in that state. And so it's not in your best interest to get Google to create forms for you, whatever other services you're looking at, because it's just not the same as where you have an attorney that can advise you, who's experienced and can actually cater to your particular needs. And so there is a big difference in that. And trust me, if you do it right the first time, your family will thank you. Now we have another question that just came in. If my children are still young and we have godparents, do we really need an estate plan? That's a great question, and thank you for asking that. This is important because kind of what I said earlier, if you missed that point of my talk, is the will is vital to naming your guardian. And even though it would be nice for godparents to automatically be the guardian, because, and I say that as a godparent myself, it doesn't work that way. The courts want to see something that's formally created by an attorney, that's been, properly, created by the client themselves, so that there isn't a dispute. So without anything in order, it does leave room for fights, for challenges. The court now has to get involved with appointing a guardian for your children, and that could be a whole process in itself. And again, wouldn't be in the best interest to leave it up to the godparents, unless you decide to put them in the will, of course, and that's a whole different story. So I kind of hope that answers the question. I hope it does. I have one more question here. Of course, let's talk money. So people want to know, how much is an estate plan? Well, the answer is, it depends. You knew that answer was coming, right? The reason I say that is because the estate plans, really depending on what you need, they could be as little as $400. It could be as high as, $5,500. Then that's in the higher end. But it depends. A trust really can be anywhere from $2,000 to $3,500, depending on, again, your needs. The more assets you have, the more net worth you have, the more complicated the estate plan becomes. There's tax issues that arise. So we do account for that when we quote clients on what they need. And so transparent pricing is what I pride myself on. So I always try to tell people, this is what I think it would cost. And then we review your assets and make sure we give you the best price for what it is that we're doing for you in your basic estate plan. And so that is kind of the long-winded answer of what does it cost. So make sure that you also keep that in mind, that it's saving you money now, because your family won't have to go to probate. Even though it's an expense now, it saves you money later. So just keep that in mind. Let me see what else. I also wanted to discuss one more question I have here. So one of the questions is, when a probate looks over the estate, how complicated is that? Well, to be honest, it's a long process. The estate has to be opened. There's a bond that needs to take place. There are so many steps in a probate that really are left for the attorneys to handle, but unfortunately the family is the one that has to oversee everything. And so it's always important for you to consider this as a place you don't want to be. You want to avoid it, and which is really why I got in this area of law, because you want to prepare, you want to plan ahead, and that's really what it's about. Probate can get complex. There's always a crazy uncle or a crazy niece that comes out of the woodworks that says, "Oh, I was an heir and I'm entitled to, 50% of the estate." So it really just depends. I mean, it really depends on the family. They could be contested, which is kind of the crazy niece example I just gave you, and there could also be a non-contested, where it's easy and everyone gets along. And yeah, that's great, and it works out just fine. But again, it's still stressful for the family, because not only are they grieving a loss of a loved one, but they're also having to deal with the legalities that come from that. And so that in itself can be really overwhelming. But yes, probate is not a place I would highly recommend that you have to send your family to, so which is why, again, we're discussing ways to avoid that with the proper estate plan. Okay. Well, I also wanted to just kind of take the time to everyone that has heard me so far and has taken the time to listen today. At the very least, I hope that you learned something today that you didn't know before you started this 50 minutes ago. But again, my goal is to educate so that you understand, really, for parents, the basics of estate planning. And that's really important for me, for you to learn something that you didn't know before you started. I want to thank all the viewers today also for their questions. That was really helpful. When the viewers have questions, they're all questions that other people have. And as I said, we are offering those consultations from the safety of your own home if you want to do them virtually. Also doing them in the office. And yes, we have plexiglass, we have a mask, we have sanitizers if you wanted to do that. Also, as I mentioned before, we are a fully bilingual law firm. We speak Spanish fluently, so we can do consultations in full Spanish. And that is always important for me to mention, because there are people that might have someone that they only are, Spanish is their native language. So we do speak in Spanish. I cherish the opportunity to earn your trust. I really do. And becoming an advisor to you and your family is for a lifetime. And that is really my goal. Estate planning is not a one-time Band-Aid sort of thing. It really is for the long term. And as your personal family attorney, I can guide you through the process in some of life's happiest times and also in the not so happy times. Y para mi comunidad latina y hispana, como su abogada personal, le puedo ayudar en lo primordial de cada familia. I invite you to join us here again next week, same time, same place, same format, Facebook Live, and invite your friends, share the video. Make sure to tune in with, any fellow parents, any family, friends, anyone that would be interested in listening to any of this. And also guardians. If you were a guardian of a child, please, I also encourage you to join. This holiday season, also keep in mind that we are still doing virtual consultations up until the 23rd. I think we are taking off the 24th, so you can always, and the 25th, so you can always schedule something ahead of time as well. We hope to see you again here next week. Again, thank you for your time right here on Facebook Live, and hope you have a wonderful day. Stay well, and thank you so much.